Wave 5 just came out this past week on July 12th, and in addition to the new tracks and characters, we got a bunch of quality of life changes and bug fixes, along with yet another balance patch. So in this video, we're going to do a deep dive and cover everything that you need to know about Wave 5. First of all, let's walk through the updates in the patch notes. The first one has to do with how random item selection works in custom items lobbies. When you're here, you can select a random subset of items to turn on. I put that in scare quotes because it's not truly random, and not in the pedantic computer science sense of, well, you know it can only ever be pseudo-random, but in the sense that the game isn't actually selecting from the pool of individual items, but from presets of those items that have certain themes. There are different presets depending on which game mode you choose, and the latest patch apparently introduces more presets if you have 4 or fewer players in the lobby. The next set of changes relates to how the game warns you when you're about to get wrecked. Usually when someone throws a red shell at you, or if they're rolling up on you with a piranha plant or a star, a little notification will show up on your screen letting you know to be careful. They've extended the range and given priority to red shells and blue shells so that now you can actually see when 2 red shells are coming for you instead of having to use your rearview mirror. Additionally, when a red shell is targeting your opponents, it will no longer show up as a notification on your screen. The final quality of life change is that they lowered the appearance of mirror mode and 200cc in worldwide and regional races. Now look, I actually like 200cc quite a bit. I mean, I am a speedrunner after all. And on the one hand, I'm kinda sad to see this change go into effect. I'd prefer if they kept these game modes in, but just let us know that one of these alternative game modes is coming up ahead of time so that we can adjust our setup as appropriate. Or hell, even just let us choose which game mode we want to play before going into worldwides at all. But at the end of the day, if this means we finally get less mirror mode online, I'm willing to pay for that with less 200cc. All in all, these changes are fairly low impact, and I don't expect them to have a huge influence on how the game is played at really any level. But in addition to the quality of life changes like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we got a new balance patch. For the characters, this was mostly in the form of tweaking their invincibility stats, with about half the characters getting buffed, including the old meta character of Waluigi, and the other half getting nerfed, including the new meta character of Yoshi. However, the Tanuki Mario and Cat Peach class of characters all got a small mini turbo buff. Unfortunately, this doesn't do much for the viability of the Cat Peach class, which is still not very good, but for the Tanuki Mario class, this makes them statistically almost identical to Yoshi, with the remaining differences being that Yoshi has lower weight, but higher traction than Tanuki Mario. The thing is though, that traction really only matters on slippery courses like Dolphin Shoals and DK Summit, and even then, it's not really clear how much a half bar of traction is going to affect your lines on those tracks. In contrast, the slightly higher weight could actually help you from getting bumped around a bit, meaning that it's not at all unlikely that we'll see a shift from Yoshi to something like Villager or Ink Striker online. However, since weight is irrelevant in time trials, the time trial meta is unlikely to shift at all. I should point out that we did see some more buffs to the underutilized carts and tires again, but these were all fairly off meta, so it's unlikely that these changes are going to have any real impact to the game at all outside of some niche time trials here and there. But that's it for the balance and quality of life changes. Obviously, the main draw to Wave 5 was all the new content we got. I think what people were probably most hyped about were the 3 new characters. First up is PD Piranha, who shares his stats with Metal Mario and Pink Gold Peach. This class of characters is similar to Rosalina, which you might recognize as being one of the meta characters, but with a little bit extra weight at the cost of a little bit of mini turbo. This makes PD slightly off meta, but even if he did share his stats directly with the Rosalina class of characters, the problem is he's just so big. Now, I generally think that people who argue that Waluigi was popular because he's smaller than Roy or DK, which made it easier to see what was going on, are facing more of a placebo effect than anything else. But I messed around with PD on stream for about half an hour the other day, and I was genuinely uncomfortable at how large this dude is, and found myself constantly trying to look around his gigantic head to see where I needed to go next. Granted, I was playing on Los Angeles laps during this clip, which is already one of the more confusing courses, but we'll get there in a couple minutes. The next character we got was Wiggler. I'm sorry to say that he shares his stats with the recently deceased Waluigi, and boy oh boy do you feel the lack of mini turbo with this character now, especially if you're playing for the memes and using Wiggler like I was. The other thing is, and I know I'm being nitpicky here, but when you get hit with stuff, he turns angry and red for a bit, which is a fantastic little detail to be sure, but he literally goes from red to yellow in a single frame, and it's just kind of jarring. I think this would have been better if it was a more gradual, like 3 to 5 frame shift back to yellow, but again, I recognize I'm being super nitpicky with that. And in either case, he's cute as ducks, so it makes up for that. The last character we got was Comic. I haven't really played with him much, but he shares his stats with Luigi, making him the only actual meta character in the bunch, and he's just sort of there, so not much to really talk about there. Now obviously in addition to the characters, we got 8 new tracks, and I spent about 7 hours playing them on stream in Grand Prix mode, time trials, and with viewers, so I wanted to talk a little bit about my initial feelings about each of the tracks, and about the wave as a whole. consider this a little mini track ranking video, so I'm going to be talking about them in order from least good to best, and yes, there is a reason I worded it that way. First up is Moonview Highway. It's a fairly boring course where the optimal path through is mostly just driving straight, and there isn't a single shortcut to be had here. It's also annoying that there's a lot of blind turns where the bomb cars can be just laying in wait to ruin your day before you get a chance to react, so you'll need to be careful when playing through it. If nothing else though, the music goes so hard, especially during the jazzy underpass section where the saxophonist is playing like the rent is due. Still though, while the vibe is amazing, it's not enough to distract from the monotony of the course. Next up is Sunset Wilds. I said in my reaction video where the Wave 5 trailer saved my marriage that this seemed like a less interesting version of Mario Circuit 3, and that's basically how I feel about it now. The shortcuts aren't super impactful, and because of the weird off-road that isn't off-road that's strewn about the course, the path you have to take to even approach the shortcuts is fairly narrow, which makes it really easy to get sniped on the way. Not a bad course by any means, just fairly middle of the pack and forgettable for me, aside from the music, which I do actually enjoy quite a bit. Coming in at number 6 is a California native it pains me to say is Los Angeles Laps. Again, it's not a course I find particularly distasteful, it's just that nothing about it really stands out for me or gives me that Los Angeles feel. Where's LAX? Where's the university? Where's the rush hour traffic caused by rubberneckers on the 405 watching someone change their flat tires, thereby preventing me from getting home to my wife and children until 2 in the morning? Okay, seriously though, it's just a fairly generic beach city course, which, now that I think about it, actually describes the greater Los Angeles area pretty well. It's a fairly confusing track and really technical with a lot of sharp blind turns, but it's also one of those that once you learn how to play it, it's probably going to be a lot of fun. Not the worst city track in the game to be sure, but definitely not the best. Number 5 is Koopa Cave. Number 5 is Koopa Cape. Like many of the other courses in Wave 5, there are a lot of blind turns here where if you don't know they're coming, you'll get flung face first into a wall. This can be frustrating your first couple goes through, but eventually realize what you need to do, and when it clicks it feels really fun to play. Then you hop into a room with other people and get into the underwater tunnel section with fireballs and green shells getting shoved down your throat, and you realize, damn, it was almost great. I'm not joking, by the way. Out of the 8 or so times I played through this course with other people, not a single time did I make it through this bit without getting destroyed on lap 1. I feel like it's going to be a lot of fun to time trial though, so definitely looking forward to the basic training for that. Number 4 is Daisy Cruiser. Anyone who knows me knows that I have a pretty strong bias against front-running courses, and maybe after playing it online more my opinion on this one is going to shift, but for now, I actually had quite a bit of fun with it. After the first outdoor bit, you go into the ship with partygoers moving back and forth in their tables, and it kind of forces you to keep your eyes peeled and not just go on autopilot. There's also not a lot of weird anti-grav or Lakitu zones for people to bump you into, like on Wario Stadium or N64 Rainbow Road, so this one is just kind of pleasant to drive on. The vibe is also fairly chill and cool as well, and as a pretty chill dude myself, I can definitely appreciate that. Number 3 is Vancouver Velocity. I'm gonna be honest, I don't have a ton of things to say about it, it's just overall a pretty fun course. Though I do wish there were more in the way of decent shortcuts and less in the way of narrow corridors and blind turns. But the actual lines themselves, especially around the bridge section, are just a lot of fun to execute properly. And the music is, as I'm told the kids say, an absolute bop, so it just adds to the overall thrill and excitement of the course. Again though, lots of narrow roads to navigate through, including the aforementioned bridge section, make it prime real estate for backspamming and bombs, and this is really what holds it back from being one of the best courses for me. Number 2 is Squeaky Clean Sprint. Talk about a vibe, right? Unfortunately, it kinda suffers from Wave 5's weird obsession with cramped ass spaces after going down the bathtub drain, but other than that one section, the rest of the track is really cool. By far my favorite thing about it is just how many routes there are to take. After the kinda weird fan section where you go off the glider, you can either go to the lower part of the shelving section, or if you're on laps 2 and 3, you can trick off the toilet fountain and go to the upper part, which is a bit faster and features another glider bit. Overall, this just gives you a lot of freedom to decide exactly how risky you want to be with your front running, and doesn't really force you in a particular path. And finally, coming in at number 1 is Athens Dash. I boldly made a prediction before the wave dropped that this would be the worst track in the wave, and I'm happy to report back that I was totally wrong about that. Yes, it features a lot of those blind turns that seem to be so prevalent in Wave 5, but they require a grand total of 1 attempt to figure out each, so really it's not that big a deal. There's also a decent amount of shortcuts, which makes for good comeback potential should something happen to go wrong, and for once it seems like Nintendo finally figured out how to make stairs work, and the only time I ever dropped a stair trick was when I was intentionally trying to break them to see how much leeway I had to mess around. It deserves number 1 for that, if nothing else. So those are my thoughts on each of the individual tracks. As far as Wave 5 as a whole goes, the balance and quality of life changes are honestly fairly low impact, so I'm not really tripping on those too much. I enjoy the tracks quite a bit, but as I've alluded to multiple times so far in this video, there's this really weird obsession with cramped spaces in a lot of them. And I felt like when I was playing them online, I was never able to avoid just getting absolutely destroyed no matter how hard I tried. That being said though, I suspect that once I actually learn the tracks properly, this will probably be my favorite wave of the bunch, at the very least for time trialing. And that's everything you need to know about Wave 5. I hope you found this video useful or informative, and if so, don't forget to click the like button so that it can get spread to more people. Also, I plan on releasing my first basic training video for this wave within the next couple weeks or so make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss any of that. Thank you all very much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video, and as always, I will see you in the next one.